Dear students, welcome to Swayam Shikshaa platform. This is Ram Sudhir. So today we are going to do a specific video on basically how do we really frame introductions in the exam hall. Okay, so here our specific focus is with respect to economics, Indian economy. We will try to understand two things here. One is, how do we write introductions for GS3 answers? And how do we use our knowledge for writing philosophical essays as well? So we'll do a series of videos. This is the first video in our series. So the most important aspect is, it's not about how much knowledge we have. In that 7.5, 8 minutes, can we really pull out introductions? So when I talk about introductions, let's get into the discussion straight. We have two types of introductions we can frame. For example, one we can call it as the direct introduction. Direct. Okay. Where there is this question like, for example, what is financial inclusion? Okay. And do you think financial inclusion is required for ensuring inclusive growth? So for such questions where he's totally asking what is financial inclusion or what is a particular concept, we generally go ahead with a direct introduction, Go ahead with defining that particular word. For example, financial inclusion is nothing but spreading of banking or financial services to every nook and corner of India. Every nook and, or everybody should have a bank account indirectly. So this is basically what I'm trying to say is a kind of a direct intro. And the scope for writing direct introductions is going to be very minimum in UPSC exams generally, especially when we talk about 10 markers, etc. For example, this year there was a question. Can market economies be made inclusive? Question mark. What is the role of financial inclusion in ensuring economic growth? Now in this case, there is no scope for writing a direct introduction. So can market economies be made inclusive means my introduction cannot be something like explaining what a market economy is or explaining what inclusive growth is in a 10 marker. Why? Because in a 150 word space, I do not have the leverage to really explain the definitions and still do justice for the question. This is something everybody should understand. See, you explain the word, each and every word, and still do justice for a 10 marker is going to be very difficult. And that is the reason there is a need for what I call as the indirect intros, which is very, very critical. Very, very critical. Very important, in fact. Indirect introduction is something which will flow from history. I will take some aspect in the history and I will write or I'll frame my introduction. For example, now let's take the same question which was asked in the recent UPSC exam. Can market economies be made inclusive? Question mark. What is the role of financial inclusion in ensuring economic growth? Now, the need for market economies to be made inclusive has arisen after 1991 LPG reforms. For example, in India's case, 1991 LPG reform is the linking pin after which inequalities have increased, or we have gone ahead with somewhat called as market. We shifted our pattern of economy from socialistic pattern to the market economic model, which increased economic growth, but at the same time, there was increase in inequalities. This is something which is the linking pin. So for that particular question, I will pick my introduction from 1991 economic reforms has laid the foundation, or 1991 economic reforms. Though we have, through 1991 economic reforms, though we have adopted market economy in India, it also has increased inequalities. Or through 91 reforms or through market economic model, India was able to cross the Hindu rate of growth. But still, it has also led to increase in inequalities, arising the need for inclusiveness. So this is how I will think about an indirect introduction. So indirect introduction generally will be from the history. I should be knowing few things in the history to pull my indirect introduction, and it is very easy because through practice you can do it. Very important. Now, the same thing if I have to put in something like, how do I use my knowledge in the same knowledge, how do I use it for essay? Or how do I frame my introductions for philosophical essays? In fact, not economic essays, even for the philosophical essays. For example, there was this essay this year, history is a series of success of scientific man over romantic man. Now, here it is, of course, it is not a 10 marker. I have the leverage, I have the scope, in fact, to write a story. Or I can think about something like Karl Marx versus Adam Smith. So Adam Smith, for today, in this era, in the present era, where we could see a victory of capitalism over socialism, we can understand that capitalism runs on the concept of self-interest. And Adam Smith believed in that self-interest. Whereas Karl Marx, though you talk about communism, communism looks very good, but still today we don't find communism, we find domination of capitalism. So capitalism looks scientific and more rational in comparison to communism because capitalism runs on the concept of self-interest. Land is given for rent or labor is working for wages. Everybody is working for their own self-interest, but ultimately it is leading to something like development of one society or organization, whatever it is. Now, history is a series of success of scientific man over romantic man. Now, we can talk about something like a scientific man, that is, those thinkers who propounded capitalism were more scientific in nature, in terms of understanding people's instincts, in terms of self-interest, in comparison to people's altruistic characteristics, which is more emotional, altruistic characteristics, doing good to others. Everybody is equal, which Karl Marx was talking about. And today we find a success of this capitalism over and above the socialism or over and above communism. So this is how I can think about introductions in when we are writing essays. I hope we have understood the basic difference between direct and indirect introductions and how to pick up intros for essays as well. So this is the first video in this series. We'll come up with few more videos. If you really like such videos, please do comment in the comment box so that we can come up with more videos. Signing off. Thank you.